Convening in open session. We will first consider action on our closed session items. Mrs. Bailey, do you have a motion? You're doing a lot of things at once, and we appreciate you.
Thank you. Yes, Madam President, I do have some motions.
I knew you did. I'm like a mind reader.
You are. I move to appoint Deanna Elin to the position of high school assistant principal.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bailey and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Please raise your hand in favor. The motion is passes unanimously. Mrs. Bailey, another motion.
Yes. I move to approve Deanna Elin as a professional development and appraisal system appraiser for 2014-15, pending her completion of the appraiser qualifications according to the Commissioner's rules concerning educator appraisal provided in the Texas Administrative Code.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bailey and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Raise your hand in favor. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mrs. Bailey. Our next item on the agenda is our information item. Dr. Dupree, I'll turn the meeting over to you for our information item.
Yes, ma'am. As you know, we've been for many months now been discussing House Bill 5, the impact it will have in Fort Bend ISD and our academic programming, including the academies at our high schools, which is one of the reasons we have so many people in attendance tonight, because this has been an eagerly awaited item, much anticipation about where the district is heading on this. And I want to thank Dr. Whitbeck for her work in this area, and she's going to present the report and our proposal right now. So, Dr. Whitbeck.
Okay. Well, good evening. I know everyone is waiting for, we've been waiting for you also. We're so glad you're back and ready to get going. I'm going to start, I just want to show you a book that I have in my office, and it says, "Change is good, you go first." And that's kind of like a little premise here to the work. Change is challenging for all of us. And as I was looking through in our community relations department, I found a student course catalog from 1996. And interestingly, it is 19 pages. And on page 8, it has shorthand and speed writing for grades 10 through 12. And that was just in 1996. And the course catalog that we have for this past year is 49 pages, full of more courses and more options for our kids. So just in that short a time, we've gone from shorthand to an incredible plethora of opportunities for our kids, and that's really just the beginning of the change. And so I bring that to our awareness because it sets the stage for new legislation, new things that have driven our need to relook at what we're doing. And so I want you to focus on the words on that slide, because as we share with you a lot that we've discovered and a lot that we will recommend, I want you to know in all sincerity that it is truly thoughtful. There's been a lot of time vested, a lot of thought, a lot of conversation, listening, reading. It is truly a thoughtful recommendation. It may be what some people want, it may be what others do not, but it has been well thought through. And I want you to know that sincerely from us. So as we move forward, okay, reminding us that this is our mission. We're here to inspire and equip all students, and we believe that, that's our very best recommendation, and that will do that tonight. It is emotional. Change is difficult, but it does take planning, it takes commitment, and it takes courage. And we'll speak a little bit more about that in a few minutes. I want to bring you to the journey. Fort Bend ISD started with the Jacob study, many major initiatives that I will say are woven together to how do we best educate kids today in our school system. You can see that we have the curriculum audit. It told us what we're deficit in, not just in curriculum, but in our district. We had a college and career readiness plan that clearly spoke to a lot that we needed to do in terms of courses, in terms of what we needed to offer students. You can see that we had a bond, obviously, that passed with a very high percentage where our community is telling us they want us to get busy and to build schools and to make a change. And so all of these things have kind of, they're interwoven to the work. But as we go forward, I want to point out, we're at somewhat of a crossroad. Where do we go from here because of some new developments? We are really at a crossroad. Some decisions need to be made. They're tough decisions, but they need to be made, and then we need to follow through with them. And I think the community is asking us to go forward and do that. Okay, so let's look. Prompting a lot of the action, House Bill 5. The 83rd legislature passed this in 2013. In the winter last January, they gave us a lot more details about exactly what they wanted to see, those final recommendations, requiring coherent sequences of courses. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And allowing us to give students a little bit more flexibility than what we call the 4x4 in terms of obtaining their diploma. Still a lot of rigor, but a lot more flexibility. I do want to make sure that it's very clear that this is about preparing kids for the workforce and to be college ready, both. And that it is not about tracking, it is not about leveling a playing field or one size fits all, and I think that you will see that as we go forward. So what is our challenge? Our challenge lies in the structure. How do we best deliver the curriculum? How do we do that? And I'm really focusing on high school. High school is the most complex level. So how do we best do that? We have 22,000 students right now in grades 9 through 12, 22,000 like 100. And so that's a lot of students in that level. So as we looked at it from this frame. 2 key pillars. How do we offer students choices? And what is the best structure to deliver the choices? So if those are the 2 big pieces to the puzzle that we're going to really spend a little bit of time with. So, choice. You know, everybody likes choice. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter how old we get, we like choices. When I was a first teacher, I taught gifted and talented. It was one of the areas that I enjoyed at the elementary level at the time. And I remember in the strategies that we would learn, and it reminds me a lot about some of the questions tonight about differentiated instruction, we learned that students, especially gifted students, but all students, love choices. They love for you to be able to say, I want to read this book or this book. I want to be able to show you through a PowerPoint, through music, through writing. I want to be able to give you my choice of the way in which I can tell you I mastered. So choice, we know, is paramount. It's paramount for all kids. And so we want to look at that. How do we go about it? So here's our students. They have all these careers. They have different things on their mind. How do we help those go together for them to be in a career choice? Now, it doesn't mean that everybody in high school has to know what their career is going to be. We know better than that. They may change 10 times, even if they think they know, and that's okay. So we're going to walk you through what were the goals. We want to provide optimal student choices to fulfill the expectations of House Bill 5. Okay, that's a mandate. That is not an option for us. We want to design programs to increase access and equity. You will see that we do not have equity across our district, and we need to be mindful of that, but we also need to know that money doesn't grow on trees, and we want to be good financial stewards as we make these decisions. And we want systems that ensure that whatever we do, that we do it well, and that it's thought through. So for the purpose of this study, look at all those programs, and when Dr. Hill and her team talked about our academic options, we have lots of departments. We're a very big district. We're very complex. For the purpose of this particular work, these were the areas that we focused on. And you can see that college and career, endorsements, pathways, it did affect some foreign language and gifted, and I'll show you that in a moment. And those are the main areas that we focused on. So let's get some common definitions. House Bill 5 gives us 2 key words, an endorsement and a pathway. So an endorsement the way to think about it is a broad decision of study. So one example for high school is STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. It's a broad spectrum. Within that, there's a pathway, which means the specific endorsement or the specific area you want to study. Could be math, could be computer science, robotics, or electronics. Those are just some examples. There's more than that. So an endorsement and a pathway. You can think of it like I got a bachelor's degree in business administration, but my pathway was finance. Okay, so this is the same way that we see the collegiate world. Now, important to know is a pathway is 4 credits in a coherent sequence. And that's true most of the time, unless you're in math, and then it's 5. And if you're in science, it's 5. But in all the other ones, it's 4. Okay, so they couldn't make it too easy for us. So it's 4 most of the time and 5 in math and science. Okay, and we'll show you an example here in a moment. All right, so this visual gives you a really good, I think, a good picture. You see endorsements across the top, and you see 5. You see the science, technology, engineering, and math. You see the business industry, public services, arts and humanities, and multidisciplinary studies. Then on the left side are the pathways. So you can see the pieces that fall underneath those areas. I do want to point out on the far right, when you see the multidisciplinary studies, in that particular area, you're talking about courses that are advanced that fall in all the different ones. So if you wanted to take 5 courses in different areas because you really didn't know what you wanted to do, that's very common, and students would be able to do that. Students will also perhaps be in multiple areas. So for example, if you were a science and math student, you might earn an endorsement in science and math under STEM, but you might have also been in the band for 4 years. And so you might have an arts and humanities endorsement as well. So students can earn more than one. But it is a coherent sequence. Now what is very interesting is that it's easy for us to understand when it's Spanish 1, 2, 3, and 4. Makes perfect sense. English 1, 2, 3, and 4. When we get into some of the more complicated areas, they're not logical like that. And so it begins to get a little more complex. And Meredith does a great job of explaining that part. Okay, I do want to point out that it's very, very important because career technology education is a very big piece of this. And it is, as I said, the most complex. But it's very important that we recognize that it is not all of it. It's ROTC, it's foreign language, it's history, it's math, it's science, it's fine arts. So all of those areas are there. And I'll give you an example of one. Right now, this particular example shows you science pathway and math. And in math and in science, you take the 5 courses. So if you look up at the science, it says you're going to have 5 credits, and those are going to be biology, chemistry, physics, and 2 more advanced measures. So the student would choose. You can see across the top are the names of our high schools. And as you can see, there's a dot representing every school because currently every high school in Fort Bend ISD has that ability for their students. If you look at the math, it's the same thing. 5 courses, but it has to be at Algebra 2 as the minimum and 2 additional. So this might be a child who would take pre-calculus and then calculus, okay, or AP statistics, something like that. Okay, so those are examples, and this is just to point out that it is not all about career and technology. It is very much about core curriculum, and it is about the fine arts and all the other areas. Okay, so we're going to turn it over to Meredith now, and she is going, there you go, and she is going to share with you a little bit more about how it is affected by career technology.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Whitbeck, Dr. Dupree, Ms. James, and the board. I'm going to discuss with you a little bit about the career and technical education side of things because it is where the pathways are a little bit more challenging to understand. Before we get into the pathways, let's look at what our total CTE enrollment is. Currently for this year, we have 18,500 plus students, as compared to last year where we were sitting at 14,400 students. This is a major increase, and your first question might be, why do we see such a big increase in such a short amount of time? CTE courses cover a variety of areas, one of which is professional communications. That particular class counts for our speech credit as defined by our board of what we expect our students to take. So we have seen an increase in those areas. Additionally, in our CTE realm, we looked at what we are offering district-wide. Right now, we're offering many courses that don't flow in a coherent sequence. So we want to look at doing in-depth learning instead of surface level by just offering 1 or 2 opportunities here and there. This will impact our industry certifications, which we have discussed on different times. We really need to move students in the direction of more advanced coursework within CTE in order to get them to achieve those industry certifications. This is explained when you look at an actual course list. So what you see on the board in front of you is the list of 17 classes that are currently available in our agriculture, food, and natural resources area. That is referred to as the career cluster. Campuses can choose to offer these courses as their programs allow. So right now, we have any number of these courses offered at 9 different campuses. The document that's on the screen in front of you at this time represents where those agriculture, food, and natural resources classes are currently offered. So you'll notice the dots. There's 2 columns for every school. The first one is current, and the second one would be a proposed pathway or a proposed course offering. You'll notice that we have 2 campuses with no dots. They do not currently have this opportunity for students on their campus. When we look at the next slide, you will see that we've added squares. The squares indicate where we would like to recommend offering pathways. When you look down towards the bottom, the 4th one up, you'll notice that some campuses have dots in the current column, but no squares or no dots in the second. As part of aligning our pathways and making clear-cut opportunities for students to reach higher level academics within CTE, it's going to be necessary for us to cut back on some of the choice as far as what campuses can offer. That does not mean we're cutting back on choice for students. That means we are better aligning what we are offering at campuses across the district. By offering more depth, we will lead students to higher achievement in certifications and greater preparation for college and career opportunities. Oftentimes, there's a misconception that in career and technical education, we're not steering towards the student who might want to go to higher education. That is simply not the truth. We have courses such as business and industry. We have health science. Any career cluster where students are going to be touching someone else's life is going to be covered by CTE. By looking at more in-depth course options within CTE pathways, we will be able to offer dual credit opportunities. We'll be able to offer articulated courses, which will count at junior college level classes. We will be able to better align with the more advanced core curriculum. So as you advance in a pathway for CTE, the rigor of what is expected in the core subject areas, such as math, also advances. We'll take one more look at another course offering or another section, and that's looking at the health science. The reason we picked this one to talk to you about is because our numbers that were collected from our 8th grade plan, ACT plan data, indicates that we have a very high interest rate across this district in the health sciences. That coupled with what workforce industry is telling us, which is right now we have a growing need in the health science industry, made this one a good one for us to look at. You'll notice that all campuses offer anatomy and physiology. That course can count as both science and into an elective pathway such as CTE. You'll see that under Hightower High School, students who are currently enrolled in the Medical Academy have multiple opportunities to experience coursework that could lead them down any number of pathways in the medical field. Austin High School, Dulles High School, and Kempner High School also offer opportunities for students to engage in health science courses. Right now, we do not offer that at other campuses. The recommendation in moving forward is that we consider putting this opportunity at all of our campuses. that will better service what our student needs are, our student wants are, and what industry is telling us that we need to service students with. You'll notice that Hightower High School remains with significant differences in course opportunity. As we discuss how the Academy falls into this later on in the presentation, you'll see that continuing to offer multiple opportunities at Hightower becomes necessary because this particular line of study requires extensive licensures. Sometimes it becomes very challenging to find teachers that have those extensive licensures. And so we would not be able to offer all of these courses at any one campus. However, we do feel strongly that we could offer some degree of health science at every campus. Let's take a look at the overview of what this means. And just to reiterate, the endorsements are the 5 titles that we discussed earlier that House Bill 5 dictates that we will offer to students. The pathways are the opportunities to achieve those endorsements. And looking up top, you'll notice that the black numbers are what we currently have in pathways. The important thing to understand is that that doesn't mean those are all the courses we have, because at a lot of campuses we have 1 or 2 courses, but not clearly defined pathways. So we have 166 clearly defined pathways right now. And just so you'll understand the differences is we fluctuate between 7 pathways at 2 of our campuses, all the way up to 21 pathways currently being offered. That is a very wide discrepancy. And moving forward, we would like to expand the CTE opportunities at many of our campuses by expanding the pathways. That does not necessarily mean adding more classes to the course list. It means being very strategic with the campus principals about determining what courses are offered. We would look forward to putting 260 pathways on the various campuses. That takes our variety from 18 to 26, or our differences. It is simply not possible to offer 26 pathways at every campus. We do not have enough student body. We do not have enough space. We do not have the financial resources to offer 26 pathways at every single campus. However, in looking at that, we believe that we've put forth a plan that will allow us to grow as our student population grows and as time dictates by industry and by student need. Before we move on to talk about the great work that you all did and the community did on the bond, I want to point you to the packet that was on your table when you got here titled Pathway Descriptions. I think this will help give you a visual. When you flip to page 1, what you are looking at in this document as compared to what you have seen already, these are where we outline what a pathway is. So I'm just going to use page 1. Give everybody a chance to find it. Lots of color-coded dots. Okay. So I'm going to reference page 1, 2, and 3, and then I'll leave the rest for you to look at and ask questions as we go on. And looking at page 1, these are 3 clearly defined pathways inside the agriculture, food, and natural resources endorsement option. So we are proposing that we would have an animal science, a plant science, and an ag mechanics pathway. When you look at this, you will notice that not every campus has all 3 of those pathways. We cannot put all 3 pathways at a campus. I would caution you that this document has not been talked through with principals, and before we move forward on putting anything into print, we would sit down with campus principals, with their CTE staff, and look at what the best options are on their campus. As in the recommendation, you will notice that we do propose having ag at Marshall and Willow Ridge. When we sit down and look at what their students have and what we can put at that campus, we will determine which of those pathways is the best option. Briefly, let's look at page 2. And 3, if you want to flip back and forth, I will point out that one of the things that makes CTE so challenging is because our certifications for teachers are not quite as clear-cut as being certified in math or certified in social studies. For example, the bottom pathway on both page 2, Architecture and Construction, and page 3, Arts and AV, Communications. So you have interior design and fashion design for the people in the audience. Those courses can also be taught by human services teachers. And for those of us that remember the 1996 course guide, we would refer to those as our foods classes. So our teachers that used to teach foods in the early 90s are also certified to teach courses in architecture and construction and arts and AV by the way that they fall. So if you compare the two documents, you will see that some campuses would have 2 in the architecture pathway, while some may have 2 in the arts and AV. The consideration is given to looking at what certifications our teachers hold. And again, this document is a rough draft at this point until we have the opportunity to sit down with campus principals and make decisions that are best for their campus. In closing, I'd like to bring us back to the work that you all did and the community did in passing the recent bond. Previously in the facilities master plan, there was a recommendation that we consider a standalone career and technical education center. And moving forward, we feel like we need to explore the opportunities and the options of having a new CTE center, potentially adding on to our current technical education center, and or looking at our facilities on current campuses. Courses that belong at specialized centers such as the current Tech Ed Center or a future career and technical education center are those that require extensive equipment and are very specialized. They would be junior and senior level coursework similar to welding, robotics, petroleum engineering, cosmetology, and culinary arts, just to name a few. It is not feasibly possible to put petroleum engineering with advanced seismographic equipment at every single campus. So in finishing up, I'd like to thank you for the work you did on the bond, and I'd like to pass the microphone back over to Dr. Whitbeck.
Okay. All right, we're going to walk you through a few more aspects related to all of the decision-making that's ahead. Our foreign language department, part of our CNI, they are working on their 5-year plan. Foreign language is somewhat connected because there are pathways where students can take 4 years or more of one language, or 2 years and 2 years of 2 different languages. And we need to be able to offer that in our campuses. So we're proposing that we want to make sure that at the bare minimum we provide Spanish and French at each campus. So if a student wanted to go with the 2-language pathway, they would be able to. We also want to work to add Mandarin Chinese at each of the campuses, and that will be kind of a work in progress. But we know that we've got to focus on world languages and relate to the workforce need. And we will be looking at other languages. These may be through distance learning. These are very difficult to find certifications as well. Sandy Harvey and Susan Vardakis and our team will be working through this. But we do know that it's important that we offer at least 2 options at every one of our high schools. So I wanted to cover that piece. Gifted and talented. We've talked a little bit about that earlier tonight, but I just want to reiterate that we're recommending the comprehensive K-12 review during the next school year. This is going to tell us about how do we believe it's best to serve students. Is it through clustering? Is it through pull out, push in? Is it through what type of a setting is it? Is it to segregate kids into one area, one school? Is it better to divide them up? All of those decisions that this task force would look at, looking at best practices, structure, and identification. So, right off the bat, I want to go ahead and address gifted and talented at Quail Valley Middle School. Enrollment has 596 students. We recommend that it continues for the 2015 school year while this comprehensive study is taking place. And that comprehensive study will help guide us in the future for what we believe is best to serve those students in gifted and talented at middle school level. Okay, so I'd like to have some common vocabulary so that as we go through this next part, we're having apples to apples in terms of what we understand to be true. And, you know, these terms like magnet schools and academies, they're out there. You know, they're used interchangeably. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about how some of them developed. But the main thing to know about magnet schools is that usually they're located to attract students to a particular area. Usually it's an underprivileged area where they're wanting to bring in a high-level program to help boost a particular school. You often see these in very urban areas across our country. So they can be standalone, or they can be schools within schools, but most often they tend to be standalone. Now, academies are more small learning communities. They're usually within schools, and most often across our country, they're career-focused. And then, of course, the comprehensive high school, which Fort Bend has been committed to throughout time, is that there is the high school that offers it all. They offer lots of courses. They have football teams and bands, and they have all of the extracurricular that students may want to choose to participate in. So those are just so we're on the same page in terms of our vocabulary and what we're talking about. I'm going to make sure I covered that for a moment. So let's look at the historical perspective, because now it's time to really talk about academies and what's been going on that led us to this point. So around the 2000s, this was a reform. It really came from the No Child Left Behind. And this movement prompted a lot of studies across our country to look at how do you restructure especially high poverty and low performing schools. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation poured a lot of money into this research. And we see that in these small learning communities, you saw schools within schools, you saw academies within buildings, and you saw freestanding magnets, okay? So what happened as they went through this early 2000 era, they found that moving in that direction was really not giving them the results that they wanted. They found that they were more effective to actually begin a school from scratch than to try to convert and to have these small schools within schools and things of that nature. And they were really actually very discouraged by that. But what did the research tell us, and what did they find? That the main thing is best practice. That regardless, it is really about that moral imperative. Now, career academies were the most successful, but the structure was really not what it was all about. What it was about was fidelity. And as you look at the research, you can find article after article, and we actually had our research team that works under Jan Moore, Yu Ping, actually pulled a lot of that research. I've read it all as part of my process. And what you find is, here's a school in a town, and they have a magnet school, and everybody loves it, and it's great. And here's a school in another town, and there's articles, and it's a comprehensive high school, and it's meeting everyone's needs, and people are very happy. And here's an academy, and it really boils down to how well it's implemented with fidelity. What type of leadership, what type of programs are located within it, how strong is the faculty, how strong is the leadership in the school, all of those things. Not so much that there's a perfect ticket. Do this, and you will have success. That is not what the research tells us. It tells us that it's about fidelity. So let's look at Fort Bend ISD. So this is happening in our country. This is happening across the Gates Foundation, all of this around the 2000s. So Fort Bend ISD, in very good thought, opened academies. You can see how they would have done that. In 1998, Hightower High School opened with 3 different academies: medical science, digital media, and engineering. Moving on, in 2002, Marshall High School opened electrical engineering and the GIS, information systems, global information systems. After 2006, quite a few different things happened. We opened the GT Academy, Quail Valley, Global Languages, which was what it was called at the time at Clements, International Business Marketing at Bush, and Engineering moved from Hightower to Elkins. After 2006, we opened an International Baccalaureate program at Marshall, the middle school equivalent at Missouri City, Math and Science at Dulles, and Game Design at Willow Ridge. So as results of those particular ones we phased those out. There was a low participation rate at the time, and Global Languages converted to Global Studies. So, here we are, and where do we go from here? So, what happened after we learned all of this history, We looked at everything. And so I want to refer you back to my first slide, which was about thoughtful solutions. How do you go about attaining a thoughtful solution? You do your homework. And so these slides, I'm not going to go over them, but they show what happened. A comprehensive tour of every school, every academy, every career and technology facility within our district, including the Tech Ed Center and each high school, looking at CTE courses even at the middle school, meeting with principals, meeting with academy coordinators, working with district leaders in curriculum, instruction, and leadership. So lots of homework, and you can see there's a few other ones of a comprehensive timeline. But the bottom line is that there was a lot of stakeholder input, and that's what you need to know, a lot of stakeholder input. And we're searching for the best ways to meet the requirements for House Bill 5 and to offer our students choices. Now, as you see this timeline, I also want to share with you, there we are today, 11:10 is this presentation. Tomorrow night and Thursday night, we will have community dialogues where our community will be able to hear the presentation. They'll be given an opportunity to ask questions or to have their questions answered. We're going to have a website at the bottom there on 11/14 through December 1st. We'll have a website specifically for this, open for comment. There's also a survey that our community can take and give us more input. Upon receiving those, we will reconvene the leaders, and we will take input from you as our Board of Trustees and our community, and we will meet before we bring back to you our final recommendations, which there is for your vote on December 15th. Okay? All right. So, what are our recommendations? I want to show you a slide because this has been an interesting journey. I've put a lot of years into this field. I've seen a lot of different types of models. And in the course of the last few months, and really I'll go back into from about early last year, so over about a year, we've been hearing a lot about our academies. It's been a very emotional issue in this district. At least that's how I would describe it, a very emotional issue. There's a lot of pride. There's a lot of faith. There's a lot of success stories. I want to show you some of these. There's controversy. There's talk about cost, talk about grade point, transportation, pros, cons, pride, emotion. You know, you're pushing us out because we belong there, other kids don't belong there. Rank in class, all of these things we all know, we've been a part of it. And I think as I share with you the final recommendations, I want to say to you and to our families and our students, these are all very real. They're very real. And they have been very considered. And they are respected. There is no decision that will please everyone. So we go back to our core beliefs. We go back to our mission statement. We go back to how do we best serve children in this district. Again, knowing even the research doesn't give us the perfect model. So I do want to acknowledge, and I do want to compliment a lot that has gone into the academies, and particularly the academy leaderships in our schools, because they are doing a good job, and there are many, many success stories. So let's take a look. Our very first one, Digital Media Academy, Hightower High School. Enrollment has 231 students, and the recommendation is to phase this academy out, allowing all current students to continue through graduation. And I want to use this particular academy as my moment to elaborate on what does phase out, allowing all current students to continue, mean from our recommendation to you as the board. What that means is that we would allow the students to finish, all students, including freshmen, all the way through until they graduate with integrity. We would staff it. We would keep academy coordinators. We would provide transportation, because this is a programmatic change. This is not a boundary change, and this is not a new high school. And I will give you a moment of my own background on having opened a high school. When students get those kind of opportunities, it is very, very different than moving to an existing high school. When you enter into a new high school setting, even if you enter, say, as a sophomore, you have a background, you've already been a tiger or a cougar, you've already had identification. But now you're getting an opportunity to go with your neighborhood to a whole new place where you get to be a leader and you get new opportunities that you might not have gotten to play sports, to do more things, participate, because you're in a new school. It is very different than taking a student in high school, and particularly focusing on high school because the dynamic is very different, and taking them and moving them to another existing high school where they may be randomly selected from throughout our district. It's not their whole neighborhood. It's a very different issue. And so our recommendation is that we do it with fidelity and that we make sure that we take care of every student who committed to these programs. So this pathway, we want to make you also to understand about rationale. Why? We intend to offer arts and audio, visual at every school. Several of our schools already have this. We also are noticing a very low freshman enrollment, and almost half of the students at the freshman level are from Hightower High School anyway. So we believe that this one makes sense from a lot of different perspectives to phase it out, mostly because we believe that we can offer the same thing at each school. Okay, let's look at engineering, Elkins High School. 228 students, recommend phasing out, allowing all students to continue through graduation with the exact same criteria that's already been shared. Now, why is that? Pathways are going to be offered at all campuses. If you'll notice the enrollment in this particular academy, 123 out of 228 attend in the Elkins feeder pattern anyway. Project Lead the Way is being considered for each high school. So this school would be able to continue to offer what it is, and we would pick this up as offerings at the other high schools. Global Studies, Clements. 365, same recommendation, phase out, allowing all current students to continue through graduation. Now this particular academy is highly sensitive in our community. You know, it does say up there it is not a career pathway. It is not, according to House Bill 5 and the way in which it's structured now. Again, that's not the total driving force because you could add courses to make it that if that's what you wanted. But courses currently at this academy can be offered at the other schools. And the little bits that need to be tweaked could certainly be tweaked. This academy has a lot of strengths in terms of the diversity, the multicultural focus, and those things can be carried on as part of the spirit and the integrity at Clements, and they can also be duplicated at other schools with a willing leadership team and a willing staff. So our recommendation is that it be phased out in the same vantage point. International Business and Marketing, Bush High School, 112 students, recommend phasing it out through graduation. Now this pathway is already offered at each campus. There are 61 out of 112 students attend from Bush. They've had a very strong DECA and marketing program, which is one reason why it was originally placed at that school, and there would be no reason why that would not be able to continue. Math and Science, Dulles High School. 369. We recommend phasing this out because this pathway can be offered at every school. There are 119 students that are already zoned to Dulles. Now, in this particular program, they require 11 courses in math or science, and they are requiring them at an advanced level, that they take them at a pre-AP or an AP level. These courses, every school has that many to offer in math and science. And you saw that from those beginning slides I showed you about if you were in a STEM endorsement. What this particular campus offers, and I believe Clements does some too, is like multivariate calculus and like physics 3, things like that. Those are very highly specialized. Those courses would continue at this school while these students are here. By the time younger students move up and through, then we will be making sure that we have a way in which the students at any of our campuses can reach those highest levels. It may be through distance, it may be through a career and technical center, which we're seeing more and more of our neighboring districts offering high-level math or science classes at some of those places too, where a student can go over and take the class and then return back to their school. So there's lots and lots of ways for us to reach it by the time we get to those students that would enter next year that would get up to that level by the time they're mostly seniors, could be juniors. So anyway, that is our recommendation for math science. Medical science, Hightower. Enrollment is 561. We recommend this academy continues. but we do want to look at some course requirements and criteria for admittance, and we want to strengthen it a little bit in terms of what those requirements are. And why is this one different? Because it's highly specialized. Its pathway cannot be duplicated at every campus. There's very challenging licensure by staff. It has a long history. It's close to the medical center. It certainly has those things, but mainly it cannot be duplicated with the same kind of fidelity. It takes too much specialization. So we believe that academy needs to continue. Okay, so I want to give you an example right now of how do these decisions affect kids in our district. So kind of take a moment here, and we have 3 friends on the screen. I do want to point out that these are not Fort Bend students. These are paid actors who, no, we got off the internet. Anyway, these are profiles, though, that we want to share with you as a typical example. So I would like someone to pick a student, 1, 2, or 3. 2. That's mine. Okay. This student, number 2, falls among the top 10% of the campus and has taken an extensive number of AP courses in all 4 content areas. His goals are to travel the world, working his way up through an oil and gas company where he wants to land as CEO. He will achieve a business and industry endorsement focusing through coursework which focuses on business management and natural resources. He will achieve a STEM endorsement due to completing 5 science courses. Additionally, he's going to receive a multidisciplinary endorsement due to AP coursework in 4 core content areas. And while completing these courses, he was still able to take several electives from fine arts. And upon high school graduation, he will move on to college coursework in the field of engineering. So that is student number 2. Another one.
Number 3 represents a population that has experienced learning differences. She has been successful in completing coursework in her least restrictive environment, which included general education and special education classes. She will earn a public service endorsement by taking courses such as human growth and development and principles of health science. In the future, she might obtain a nurse's aide certification that will allow her to work in a facility such as a memory care home, or she may decide to seek further education and training through post-secondary opportunities.
And number 1, thank you, Ms. James. All right.
Number 1 is the star tennis player of our campus. This student takes a combination of AP and on-level courses. She will be a member of the tennis team for 4 years and will be successful in completing multiple AP courses. While her goal is to play at Wimbledon and other major opens, she would like a fallback plan of becoming a personal trainer or tennis pro. She will achieve a public service endorsement by taking courses such as principles of health science, human growth and development, nutrition and wellness, in order to satisfy her backup plan. While she may very well be the next tennis superstar, she might take college courses leading to a degree in nutrition or kinesiology.
Okay. So let's look. What are our next steps? Where do we go from here? We will be seeking community feedback, as I shared with you earlier on our timeline. We will be asking your board approval for academy recommendations and also in the spring for staffing plans. Be working on the long-range planning for career and technical education, and as Meredith said, we want to begin that the minute we return from winter break to move, and that will involve the engagement of the advisory board. We want to revise the application criteria and course requirements for Medical Science Academy so that we can get those posted for application, and also that would mean open enrollment for that particular academy as well as the GT Academy. We want program and staff additions at the high schools because we know that as we've shared, we want to offer principles of health science, arts and AV, and Project Lead the Way at each of the schools. And then there are other ones I know Meredith referred to, adding agriculture at Marshall and Willow Ridge, and there's other spots where things have to be added. So we need to move on getting that clarity. We want to update our course catalog selection to match streamlining and the addition of these courses and pathways. So we know that there's a lot of work in our curriculum department to make that happen. And then the phase-out process needs to be determined and communicated. And again, we recommend that all students currently in academies continue through graduation so that we do not disrupt any families or any students due to programmatic change and shift, really due to what we've learned from House Bill 5 and our new focus. So our goals, providing optimal choices to fulfill the mandate, but also because we know that that's what's best for students. We want to design programs that are equitable, and we want systems that are implemented with fidelity. And as you recall, that those key components, choice and structure. So as we kind of wrap this up, I do want to bring us back to why we do what we do. And that is our core beliefs. And if you'll notice the commitment on core belief number 1, Fort Bend ISD will provide an educational system that will enable all students to reach their full potential. And that is really the underlying piece to the puzzle. That is our foundation. And we believe that while no plan is perfect, we believe that by moving to offer more across the board for our students and to really, in a very excited manner, explore career technology and where we can go with further providing options, that we can really achieve those goals. I do want to close, though, with this is difficult and that it takes courage. And there's a quote from Harry Truman that I found when I was browsing and I was thinking about this, because this has weighed heavy on me and it has weighed heavy on our staff, because we know that change is not easy. And the quote that I found was, "Progress occurs when courageous, skillful leaders seize the opportunity to change for the better." So, you know, as leaders, I know that your job is so challenging, and but we believe that if we seize this, that we can do even more for our kids than we're capable of doing right now in our current structure. So, courage, and it is a piece of the word encourage. And so, in closing, I would like to say that our job is also to encourage our academy students, teachers, principals, that we will support them through this phase-out process, and that we will support and encourage students entering into high school to know that they're going to have a lot of choices and that they can find the right pathways that interest them. And if they're 14 and they don't know, it's okay, because they'll figure it out and they can just explore if they don't know, and that's okay. So we have to encourage and we have to offer that genuine support system. And so I close with that and know that we are encouraged, though, by the recommendation. It has been a long process, but I do remind you that it is a thoughtful solution. It has been well thought out. And I appreciate your time, and we're here to answer any questions that you may have. Although I know if you don't have any, that's okay.
I don't think you're going to get off the hook.
You see this?
That's the question, yeah.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you very much, ladies, for the presentation is very, very clear, and thank you for the materials you supplied us in advance so we could sort of get warmed up to the concept of House Bill 5 and start to understand it. And we appreciate your presentation very much, and I know that we have some questions and comments, so I guess we'll start over here. Mr. Burdine, would you like to be first?
Excuse me. I've got 5 or 6 pages of questions here, so when Dave says we're going to be here till 11 at night, he was on it, but no.
Go for it.
My understanding is that you propose to grandfather the upcoming sophomores, juniors, and seniors enrolled in the academies, correct? The upcoming
Correct.
ones?
That is correct.
Okay. Regarding the freshmen that are enrolled in the academies this year, as upcoming sophomores, which courses would they typically take next year? Would they be academy type of courses, or would they be more of like AP honor type of courses?
It would depend upon the academy that they're in. They would take the same things that they were always planning to take. We would not alter that pathway. There are choices for our kids in each of these areas along the way. Most of our academies don't drive, all 7 periods of their day. They vary. Some drive, 5 to 7 courses the whole time. Others drive more, but they would take the same courses that they were going to take.
Okay. So Wouldn't most of the courses that would be offered to the upcoming sophomores be available at their zone schools anyway?
In some cases, so for example, if you noticed on the slide on Bush High School, I can think of that one right off the bat. Every class that they can take at Bush is available at their home campus. But the reason that we feel strongly about not doing that is because, as I shared, high school is very different. And I've been a principal at all 3 levels. And they all have emotion and they all have ties when they're moved to different schools. But high school, you become very vested. You are a part of that band or that team or that club. It is not the same. And so I think we should honor that at the time in which the students entered into those academies, it was not public or published that, oh, this might change, even though we know that we have policy, but I don't believe that that was ever made as a very strong possibility to our families who made a decision. Okay. So I would say that we've made a programmatic change, but we honor the past.
My questions are building upon something here that I could just see in the future, so just hang with me here. So my point is if the upcoming Academy sophomores can enroll essentially the same courses as the other upcoming sophomores as their zone campus, then why do we grandfather them, which that's just what you just explained. But here's really where I'm getting at is, in my opinion, the district should be consistent in its policy on grandfathering. I currently favor, and I'm just saying off the top of my head here, juniors and seniors affected, because once we have the juniors and seniors affected by the feeder patterns and boundary changes, I could see how there could be issues. In other words, if we're going to do the same for the academy students, then we're going to have to do the same that are going to be affected by feeder pattern changes. So we just need to be very, very cautious on how that we do that.
And ultimately, I know that this is the board's decision, and we will make what you decide work. I just give you my opinion based on my background and basically looking at the social and emotional needs of students as well as programmatic needs.
Yeah, and I understand that. As long as we do the same for our academy, we are going to have to do for the others, and I just don't see how that'd be fair to do something different. So. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. Mr. Rice.
In looking at some of these charts, you have the current and proposed. And so if there's a colored dot in current and a colored dot in proposed, help me understand that.
Sure. If there's a colored dot in current and proposed, then that would be a course that would remain on that campus in moving forward.
So you're just showing we currently offer it and we
would keep it. Mm-hmm. Some of the time, and I noticed you're looking at your draft that you received last week. If you look at the one that you received today, it talks about pathways, so it doesn't look quite the same as your course offerings. But some of the time, and I'll use principles of floral design, since we've been talking about agriculture several times tonight. That course is offered on multiple campuses, but it may be that when we sit down with teachers and principals that we determine that plant science is not the best direction for that campus. So if we're not going to offer plant science, why would we put floral design, which is in the plant science pathway at a campus? So some of those courses may end up going away. I'll tell you that one of the things that play a part in that is how we fund programs and how we fund courses, because to fund a Principles of Floral Design class costs us about $18,000 in one walk-in cooler. So is it in our best interest to put walk-in coolers at campuses that are not going to have a clear pathway? Instead, we need to consider, is that the best option, and does that make the most sense?
I'm looking on the last page of this draft that you gave us last week, and it's saying, you know, this, I guess you don't really have a clear direction on whether we should have a career and technology center, one facility, add on to every campus, it's pretty muddy. But this says that with regarding anticipated budgetary implications, that year one purchases would be the most cost intensive due to fixed asset purchases such as computers, mechanical equipment, and resources. A total expense of $3.42 million is anticipated to adequately start CTE programs on various campuses. So we've got $3.42 million and $1.56 in operation. Well, let me rephrase that. Forget about the startup cost, but it's $1.56 million in operation with $1.2 million in revenue. So we've got a $360,000 deficit that you think can be offset as the number of students in the programs increase?
Yes, sir.
I mean, wouldn't that be student enrollment, student growth?
CTE pulls in weighted funding to the tune of almost 35%, or right at 35%. So anytime that we put students in CTE classrooms, we are pulling in additional funding. So that is where you'll see that we start to make up. If you refer back to the beginning, you'll notice that we've already seen a significant increase in our CTE numbers this year. We anticipate seeing those continued increases with House Bill 5 choice, because House Bill 5 now allows for students to elect to take different pathways. And so we do believe that we will make that up in pure student enrollment in CTE.
You believe you'll make it up in what year? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
I'm going to let the numbers man speak to that.
And we're talking about the 23.
The teacher salary. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the teacher salaries will not be completely offset. What we're talking about is an investment of $1.5 million for the teachers for those 23, and what we're calculating on the career and tech, the additional revenue that we get from that would be about 1.2. Okay.
So it's never going to be made up. There's always going to be.
Not completely.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows what the formula is? That's what the formula is the way they are now.
Okay. I have a different question. We've had the academies for quite a long time. And we have parents who are invested in those academies, support groups. How are we going to perpetuate that if the academies go away? I mean, I know we want parental involvement. We want them to be involved. The parents who are involved with academies now are very involved, very supportive. How do we duplicate that if the academies go away?
Are you talking about in general in terms of once they've phased out?
Yes.
Well, I think that goes along with, to me, it's a lot about campus leadership, because, you know, you can have a lot of support groups for a variety of clubs and DECA and organizations, and we do have that. A lot of booster clubs, a lot of things like that already exist at our schools. So to me, that would just be a branch to, you know, those can grow as much as a campus wants those to grow. And of course, that's a big goal for our principals, is to increase parent involvement.
Mm-hmm. So we have good parent involvement now in those other activities, those other clubs and so forth?
And I think so. I think it varies from school to some degree, and depending on the organization. You know, your athletic booster club may be a lot bigger than another particular group, but you have a lot of strong booster clubs in this district, a lot of good parental support.
Okay.
So,
my last comment is simply this. I appreciate Mr. Burdine's comments, but I think if we have freshmen who are enrolled in academies now, when they become sophomores, it would be wrong not to allow them to continue in the academy program until they graduate from high school. Whatever the board decides to do, we can't have these kids who have pinned their hopes on following this academy and then suddenly tell them, well, because you're a sophomore, you don't qualify for that anymore.
and that is our recommendation. I think that I probably could do just a moment better explanation. I want us to think about 3 buckets when it comes to this decision. First of all, you've got high school students and you open a new school. Okay, that's as I already shared. So usually, most often, you see juniors and seniors stay at their current school, and new schools open with freshmen and sophomores, which means that those sophomores went somewhere else, and they used to be some other mascot, they used to be. But again, as my explanation goes, that's different. They're all going together from a neighborhood, and they're starting new, and they've got all these great opportunities that they wouldn't have if they stayed where they were, so believe me, you can sell it. The second way is a boundary change. Okay, so now we have decisions that you have pending where students are located at one place and would then perhaps go, say, their sophomore year to another existing high school. The difference is that they go with their neighborhood. So even though they're making a change, if that's where you were to decide, they at least go with perhaps the kids they went to elementary school with or junior high, and they're all going as a group. So they've got the strength in buddies. Huge, huge difference. At the academy, you've got children from all over this district, coming from even one extreme to the other. And so they may not have anyone anywhere near them that has chosen to go to that academy. So it's not a strength in numbers for that particular student to go back to where they were that they've never actually entered before. So I think you have 3 unique situations. And as a board, you could choose to take those scenarios, which you're only really dealing with 2 now, and you could choose to leave them the same, or you could choose to say, you know, those are not the same story. And my recommendation to you would be that they're not the same story, that they're different for kids.
Thank you, Dr. Whitbeck, for that.
Wait, I'm not done. I'm not done.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So let me just make sure I'm understanding you. You're saying that if they're sophomores, you're recommending, if they're freshmen now, you're recommending that they would be allowed to continue?
Yes.
Finish out their high school term? Okay, thank you. Now I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. I'm sorry if I interrupted you. Mrs. Bailey.
I have actually a couple questions that I know you can't answer right now, so I guess a couple requests. When I actually need to see some numbers here, so when we update our high school capacity numbers, we need to include the grandfathering of upcoming sophomore, juniors, and seniors to make sure that these schools aren't over capacity when we do our feeder patterns. Does that make sense? Right now, they only include the live-ins. They don't include the academy students. So we need to see those numbers because that's going to change our capacity numbers right there. And number 2, I'd like to see a projected transportation cost. Because if we're going to provide transportation, which is what I'm understanding you saying, okay, I would like to see the cost of the transportation. So those 2 things I would like to see, because we don't know what's going to happen in our next legislative session. And if funding is cut, I mean, this comes out of our M&O budget. We don't get reimbursed from the state on academy busing. So that's a pure cost for us. Number 3, I guess I'm just disagreeing with you a little bit on the feeder pattern. Just speaking generally, we've been getting, when we talk about emotional, we've also been getting emotional emails from a couple neighborhoods. Well, I don't want to minimize these neighborhoods either by saying, okay, you're rolling with your peers to another high school. That's not true. I mean, these kids have been growing up, and it could be just a small concentration of them. So you're going to put 50 to 60 kids in a new high school. No, they're not going with all their peers. So I'm a little emotional about that because I feel for these people. I've been there, so I don't want to marginalize them, thinking that an Academies kid is more special than a zoned-in kid. So depending on the recommendations that come out, I don't think it is fair to say, okay, this neighborhood, because they moved together with this school and this school, go over now to this high school, because that high school environment is going to be totally different. So I just don't want to marginalize that, because, that's what happened in 2011. And these kids felt like they moved. So I would ask to consider those kids too. It's not the same. I mean, they're emotionally attached to that high school too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Bailey. Mr. Rosenthal.
Yes. First of all, I believe that the transportation cost is listed in here as $1.6 million, right, per year?
Yes, right
Okay,
now.
so that is a significant amount. And I think as far as the grandfathering goes, I kind of see it both ways. Emotionally, I agree, because I think of my own kid is, when she went to school as a freshman, she met all these new friends, and to think that all of a sudden she'd have to go somewhere else. So I get it. But we do need to see the numbers, because like Mrs. Bailey said, everything we've seen so far, as far as all the feeder pattern work that's been done, has just been living, and this kind of throws that 3 or 4 years down the road till you can really do anything. So we kind of need to see those numbers again. And if, as long as we're committed, I guess the fear is that we're sitting here going through all these painful feeder pattern changes and boundary changes, and 3 or 4 years down the road, something else comes along and it never happens. And anyway, those are the pros and cons. So what Mrs. Bailey is also talking about, because I saw some concerned faces, when you have a small neighborhood that is close to one school, they've been going to that school for another year and for years and years and years, and now you're talking about one little neighborhood moving to another school. She's right, they're not necessarily going with a large group of people. Okay, and we are getting a lot of emails about that. So I got one the other day. I'm sure we all got the same one, where there's a student at one high school that is scheduled to be rezoned. And the mother was talking about the relationship between her daughter and the choir director, And so you got to think about that too. So that's where that concern comes from. Overall, I think this is a great plan. I really appreciate. I spent hours and hours on this weekend, and I'm just going to point out a couple things and then let other people talk, because I can go through all my questions. We will be here till 11 o'clock. So I think what is being done here is by increasing the depth of the course level, I think is great. And I really think that, I don't think anybody can argue that overall this is better for all students. I really do. I think the comprehensive model in our situation is much better fit, because it gives everybody an opportunity to do some special things, rather than forcing them to make a decision to leave their friends and go to a different school. So one of my concerns going through the different pathways, and again, I'm relying on the one that we have, that we had this weekend, is the government and public administration proposed course offerings. This is one where everybody gets everything. And here's my problem. We all went to TASB this summer, and we go to a lot of courses, and I actually take some pretty good notes at those things. And I went to 2 sessions that pretty much had some of the same data. And I actually spoke to one of the presenters today. She sent me her PowerPoint, but I couldn't download it, or I would have sent it to you. But government and public administration, as far as employment needs in Texas, is at like 9%. It was the absolute lowest. Okay? So I think our goal should be to make sure that we're giving kids skills that they're going to go and use. And I don't think this is one of those that we need to, in other words, I think we may be wasting some resources here. And so I would have a hard time supporting this. I think with, and I don't know, this may be easy. You may have all the teachers in place because you're not looking at calculus or physics 3 teachers. You're looking at social studies and government teachers, so they're a lot easier to find. I get that, okay? But, you know, as far as foreign service and diplomacy, I know there's people talking about, oh, well, my kid wants to be an ambassador. Well, you know, good luck unless you're really into bundling campaign funds for the winning party. And I'm not kidding, because I was pulling that up earlier. Of all the ambassadorships, there's like 60 of them that are political insiders or campaign bundlers. Okay, so you're not going to be an ambassador most likely. So I really don't think that this has a lot of merit, and if we're putting a lot of resources into it, then I would suggest we not. And I would much rather focus on more technical or scientific or mathematics than putting resources into this. And that's coming right from the Texas Workforce Association and the Career and Technology Association. So, and I'll yield to others and I'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Ms. Tossan, would you like to be next?
Sure. We might as well go in order.
Isn't it nice? It's sort of systematic, isn't it?
It is.
I like that. Don't worry, I'm saving my questions.
So I'd like to, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for the amount of work that went into this. I know you guys from talking to you and watching you go through the process that you spend an awful lot of time studying this and studying other districts and the way that you know these things are implemented elsewhere. And I've done some of that myself because I know that it is an emotional issue in our community, and you know I take that very personally, and so making these kinds of decisions are very hard, and so I did take it upon myself to do a lot of research on my own outside. And you know, in studying neighboring districts and how they offer some of these things, and in studying House Bill 5, one of the things that I noticed is that, and as I've been working on some legislative things, so it was kind of eye-opening, and seeing how other districts are preparing for House Bill 5. And there are some districts that were already set up and that were really ready to go when House Bill 5 rolled out. They had a lot of CTE offerings at all of their campuses. The endorsements were very easy to roll out. The pathways were easier to roll out. And you could see a much smoother transition. CTE was a big focus in some of those districts. And so it was very interesting to study some of that and to see how that transition went pretty smoothly. And to just see all the opportunities that were already being offered, you know, for a lot of kids. And I know it was a little bit more of a struggle for us because of the way that the district was set up and how are we going to be able to expand that, because I am a big supporter of expanding programming and offering it for more kids. And I've always said that. And so I do like the fact that we're going to be offering programming opportunities for more of our children. So that being said, one of the questions I have is, how is the rigor of the courses that we're going to be offering at all of the campuses going to compare to the rigor of the courses that are currently being offered at our academies?
I can tell you that one of the things that we've been working on since I came into this position is really looking at what it means to have rigorous curriculum in career and technical education. As was noted in the audit, we did not have a lot of curriculum in place for CTE, and we've been working through that process. I will use health science for a great example. The curriculum that we have in place was written by Dr. Ricken, who is one of our teachers at Kempner High School. who happens to teach health science. Very, very rigorous. He is a college professor, and it's written to satisfy that college coursework. That is not a medical academy student, but the students at Kempner High School and at Austin High School are using the same curriculum that we're offering at the medical academy when it comes to that coursework. So I feel very strongly that when we write our curriculum and we do it well, that everybody will be meeting the same rigor. That's an interesting process where we are in CTE right now because, as we alluded to earlier, TEA is reviewing all of the TEKS for CTE. And so we're proceeding with curriculum writing. However, we know that our TEKS are changing and we know that our courses are changing. So don't get married to any name in the document because in 1 year, all these course names are going to change. And the way it all breaks out is going to change, so, of course, right? So we are proceeding with putting rigorous curriculum in place, especially focusing on our entry-level courses, our freshman courses, because we want to make sure that we are rolling those programs in the best manner possible. We're not forgetting about our juniors and seniors and the students that are in those upper-level courses right now. However, in trying to determine how we place focus, we know that those courses will see the biggest changes. Pretty much the principal's courses are going to remain about the same, or your entry-level courses will remain about the same. So we felt confident and comfortable in starting with the curriculum development in those courses. And then we'll roll in as we get answers from TEA on the new stuff.
Well, I do know so that's going to be really important. And I do know that there's a lot of concern that we're going to lose the depth that these particular academy programs offer. And so how do we plan to deal with that? And is that going to be the case?
Sure. So just to restate the question, make sure I understand you clearly, is the depth that we're offering in academies going to be available to other students at other campuses?
Yes.
I will say that the depth that we're offering in CTE academies right now is pretty much just 4 credits. Now, the medical academy is a little bit different. So when you look at what a pathway means, it's 4 credits. What are we doing in our academies right now? For the most part, the CTE academies are 4 credits. There is no difference between that and a pathway. So essentially, those students would be getting the same experience, whether they're in an academy or not. Bush High School International Business and Marketing is a prime example. What those students are doing in that academy is the exact same thing that every campus is offering in business and marketing and finance across the district. So the depth and the rigor is consistent of what we have right now in that academy and outside of it.
I'm going to add, too, that, so for example, in the engineering that we wanted to expand to each of the schools, we're selecting Project Lead the Way, which is highly vetted. And so those teachers would go, all of them, to the same training in the summer. It's like intensive, 3 weeks?
3 weeks.
3 weeks intensive training. But then, so that would lend itself to more of a comparable rigor and equity across the district by seeing to it that the training is deep, it's intensive, and it's, it's intentional. Now, I think, though, we need to own something that as a principal, and we have, our assistant soups here and Dr. Hill, and can think about this, rigor and the way in which a course is taught is very teacher dependent. And teachers, they could have the same curriculum, Meredith and I, and the way in which we go about it and the way in which we're monitored at our school can be very different. And so those are the kinds of things that that as our curriculum instruction department kind of alluded to. It's that monitoring, it's getting those strong AP, pre-AP curriculums, written and viable. But there can be differences just based on teachers, their own expertise, their own preferences. But we try to get them to stay with the written, taught, and tested curriculum and, teach it with fidelity. But so those are works in progress. But I think a lot of this is based on the training that we're going to provide as we roll out, like arts and AV, when we want that to be in every school. Where is that curriculum consistent and for rigor?
How is an endorsement going to show up on a college application?
currently, by House Bill 5, we have to report endorsements on transcripts, and there's a lot of communication about whether that's going to go on a diploma at the same time. And I think college and career readiness, we have some people over here, but Lupita, if you want to.
Yeah, do you know? I don't know the answer to that.
I'll try. Currently, we have not gotten any direction from the Texas Education Agency as to how that's going to go on a transcript. What we do right now with the 3 graduation diplomas is we have 3 different stamps that we put it on. We write in whether they're the DAP, Distinguished Achievement Program, or recommended or minimum. That being said, I have to be just, we have to be very transparent about this, and that is that a lot of the work that went into House Bill 5, higher education was not involved in that, okay, in a lot of those plans. So what we hear from the colleges, and this is where I feel like every parent has to work with their child and every counselor has to see what's in the best interest of that child, for that student, for the future. But what we hear from the colleges is that, as you know, they get kids from all over the country. And Texas has endorsements, Oklahoma doesn't, Colorado doesn't, New York doesn't. So when they start looking at students, they're looking at a rubric as to what was the strength of the courses that they took. How much math, how much science, that's what they're looking at. And they're honest with us about that. They're honest about the fact that, they want kids to take at least 3 years of a foreign language in the same language. And they're honest about the math, that, without Algebra 2, you're not going to be able to do, to go to a strong 4-year institution. We have to counsel kids in that direction.
So what does an academy look like right now on a college application? Is that something that's included?
Well, it's included in the transcript with all the courses they took. And when we send a transcript, we also send a high school profile that describes the courses that are offered there and how many APs and how many pre-APs, et cetera. So that description of the high school profile goes with the transcript.
Okay.
And so Hightower would say that they have a medical academy. But most of those students, if that is their real sincere interest, is to go in some type of medical field, and they apply to a university that does have some medical career, they'll take that into consideration because they have a good, strong background in that.
Okay, so I just have a couple more comments, and then I'm gonna pass the baton. Just regarding the grandfathering, I would agree with Mr. Rosenthal. As we're looking at feeder patterns and boundaries, and we've gotten a lot of emails and a lot of concerns, from our community, and so when we're looking at the grandfathering in this instance, I think I gave the exact example myself that you just gave, and I agree with that. I agree with the, it may not be a large number of kids, but one's a location issue and one's a programming issue, and so I see that. But at the same time, my question was going to be, before they Mr. Rosenthal and Ms. Bailey brought it up, is that if you're proposing a phase out, I assume you're proposing a phase out at that school. And we before we're thinking that Academies programming may or may not stay at a particular school depending on feeder pattern and boundary studies. And now that we're looking at a phase out, it almost seems like feeder pattern and boundary studies are irrelevant to whether or not a program's going to stay at a school if we're contemplating a phase out. So my comment would be, I think that's a very complicated issue, and I think we need to be mindful of that, because as we're doing this study and we're getting this community feedback and we're looking at implementation of boundaries and feeder patterns, not only do we have to have the numbers, but it's going to impact, like Mr. Rosenthal that said, when are we going to be implementing this? Are we doing this work now only to implement it 2 or 3 years down the road? So it's, in my mind, it's at least a little bit different than how we were considering it originally. I think that's true probably for all of us. So I think we need to see that. I think we need to factor that in, and I think the community needs to understand that. I think that whatever, if we're going to propose a phase out at a particular campus, and that campus is going to be impacted by a feeder pattern change or a boundary change, they need to understand when, what the timeline is for that. So that would just be my comment on that. The other thing I would say is that I've heard a lot in the community about concern around equity for all students at some of the campuses. And so I would like to, I know that you guys have implemented some changes, in particular at Clements, where there were some concerns, and there's been a lot of concerns on both sides at that campus. And I think we have to be very sensitive to that. And I know that some changes have been implemented to try to help with the equity issues that were going on there. So as we're going forward, if this is something that happens, I think from a counseling perspective, from a course perspective, from a grading perspective, I think we need to look at the impact of all the kids at the campuses. And I'm not saying that on one side or the other. I'm saying it as, I sit here because I care about all kids. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So I really would like to look at it from all angles at these campuses and all kids that are going to be affected. I don't want the kids that signed up for the program to be negatively impacted, and I don't want the kids, who are attending their homeschool to be negatively impacted. And I know some concerns have been circulating in the community about counseling and about courses and when they're being able to be taken, and some strategies that are being, whether they're in the academy or not. So I think that's something that we need to look at as we're looking at what we're going to do going forward. And finally, just as a suggestion, and this is for, I think, the boundaries and feeder patterns, as well as these community dialogue meetings. And I think we did this back for the facilities planning stuff, perhaps. I think we had an FAQ page where we posted answers to questions. I think it would be a good idea, because we're getting a lot, I know, of the same emails with the same questions, and we're answering them. And I don't know that we have that up for these particular issues. And I'm sure it would be helpful to the community that if we get an email and we respond to it, then that's a question that we've answered that can be posted publicly. And so, people can say, well, I have this question, let me go look and see first if there's an answer online. And then if not, they can email us, we can provide an answer, and then post an answer to that question. I think that might help the community, because I know you've provided answers to some questions, and then there are some in the communities that have the same questions and they're not getting those answers. So,
Nancy, have we posted that page yet for the feeder patterns and boundaries? Because we've been working on that.
I'm not sure. I know we've been working on it because we really agree with you. A lot of these are the same questions, and we just want it to be really clear to parents. But we agree on all of this. And so we have one that's either close to being posted, or anyway, I'm not sure. I'll have to get back.
Okay. But we will do the same for this issue.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. So thank you, guys. I know you've been working hard. I appreciate you responding.
Thank you. Mr. George?
First of all, I appreciate your hard work, and I appreciate that presentation. It is well laid out. But I have to say a few things I haven't heard from my colleagues. It is a little bit emotional, and also logically, if you look at it, you will see that, because I am an academy parent since 2008. And 15 years ago, when I moved to Sugar Land, and one of the reasons I bought a house in 1999, my children were small, but somebody told me, the realtor told me, oh, you have this kind of program. And I could guarantee you talk to parents. They will tell you, a lot of parents who are academy parents, they will tell you that's the reason why they bought their house in Fort Bend ISD, because their children have special if you wanted to, if you choose to, you could get a good education. And especially when it comes to high achievers, I believe academy programs are one of the best Fort Bend ISD currently have. And I honestly believe change is something hard. I don't know I can call this change. You're getting rid of something. I don't know it is change, because I was suspecting you're going to change something, the way Academy operates. And I thought you're going to recommend improvement, which is I'm all for. And I'm not against change. But at the same time, if you talk to, and I have noticed, when I talk to an Academy parents, I have noticed they have a story to tell, how these programs influenced their children. And I do have that story personally. And I tell you, there's a lot of discussion I heard people talking about, you're going to offer these courses in every campuses. I'm all for it. And I understand that's okay with me too. But at the same time, I promise you it's never going to be the same. Never going to be the same. Why I say that, I have experienced. My daughter last year went to Fort Settlement High School, middle school, which is one of the best middle school in our district. And this year she is at Coil Valley Middle. And she said there is no comparison what she's experiencing this year. So it's never going to be the same. And also I see that these academic courses can be used as pathways to incorporate HB5. Is that a possibility, some of these courses?
Some.
Okay, okay. Okay, so I don't know, I agree 100%. We are simply, enforcing HB5. That's the reason why we have to get rid of these programs. I don't know, I agree with that statement. And also, I see that this is going to lead to some consequences. First of all, let me tell you this. I hear some of my colleagues talking about the cost of transportation. And I understand, let me make a case in a different way. I'm not against sports, I'm not against fine arts, I'm not against any of that stuff. But let me make this case. We spend millions of dollars in sports or other areas of education. Okay? And how many NFL players or NBA players we created so far? And these students are high achievers. And I could almost guarantee that.
Can I have your attention, please? That's not appropriate in this meeting. You're here to listen, and we appreciate that, and we welcome you. But please do not interrupt Mr. George as he's speaking.
Okay. And another thing I wanted to make is, my son is not a basketball player or a football player. My daughters are not cheerleaders. So because it doesn't benefit me, we get rid of those programs. And I don't think that is right. And I honestly believe, you listen to the community and whoever it is going to be, this is something is going to affect some students and their parents and their people around them, their life. And I know how it influenced my children. And I was one of the booster club president. We formed a booster club at Hightower. And I tell you one thing, we have a lot of booster clubs. But let me tell you, the Academy booster clubs are very different because those parents are highly involved and they want these programs to perform well and they are willing to do whatever it takes. I'm not saying other parents are not. That's not what I'm saying. But my observation, what I have noticed over the years, these students are highly accomplishing. And I have seen kids doing, I don't want to get into the details of it, I have seen kids doing extremely well, going places. And also one more thing I have noticed, many times when I ask seniors or, our students in high school, hey, what do you want to do with your life? And they always say, I'm not sure. Many of our students, or more than 70, 80%, I'm not sure. Ask an academy students what he wanted to do, I will tell you more than 90-95% of them say, this is what I wanted to be. And my children, personally I could talk about, they know what they're going to be, what they wanted to be when they grow up. And so what I'm trying to say is that this decision, if at the end we decide to get rid of academies, this is going to kind of divide the community. And high achievers, in my opinion, is going to be left with mediocre education. And also, I already heard some angry parents are talking about maybe putting together a academy-based, charter school. If that happened in Sugarland area, we are going to lose 10% of our high achievers to those programs, and we are already doing it. And so it's going to be, then it is going to be a very different discussion. And also, I believe, if that happened, Fort Bend ISD is going to be a mediocre district, at that level. And I'm really afraid that's going to be the case. So my conclusion maybe tonight is, I'm not against changes, but please think about it twice what we are doing. And, these children, there are so many parents call me personally, when you're going to open up application for, next year's academy program. So many parents. I said, you know what, they're still studying it, maybe in, January or whenever they're going to open it up. And so now there is no more application, no more students. And I personally believe we are denying an opportunity for students. I personally felt this is the best opportunity I ever had for my children. And I know that so many people sitting in this room, so many people out there feel the same way. The best opportunity. And I'm not saying from our high school that our kids are not performing well. So please, my appeal to my colleagues, talk to some parents and see what they feel. And why I say this maybe a little more emotionally, because I have that personal experience. And I hope we will make the right choice. And if we decide not to continue, and like I said, some of these academies, maybe you want to discontinue, maybe it is, if there is, and also another thing about less enrollment, you mentioned, Christy, about some academies. One of the reasons was last year we cut transportation. That is one reason, affected that less enrollment. That's my guess. So look into it, and I highly encourage everybody to think one more time. Please don't blame on House Bill 5, because House Bill 5 is not saying, get rid of specialized education. Don't cater to high achievers. That's not what they're saying. And also, some of these recommendations, I highly appreciate you're doing it, because, giving an option to every school, every student, I'm okay with that. But those who wanted to go to this specialized program, those children should have that opportunity too. If they don't have, I don't know. Our commitment stands. We are going to help every student to achieve their full potential. We are not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. Okay. Mr. Rosenthal?
Why don't you go? You haven't gone yet.
Well, thank you. Let me just get a couple of clarifications. I have some couple of clarifications I'd like to get on the academies and then also on House Bill 5. So one thing I thought I heard you say was that the middle school GT Academy is going to continue, and the medical academy at Hightower is going to continue. At least that's your recommendation at this point. And you'd be accepting new students into those programs starting, I guess, soon in the December, January type time frame. Okay, so then I heard you say something about some of these pathways can be offered at the other, that mimic, this is something Mr. George, I think, was talking about, things that mimic the current academies can be offered at other campuses. What does that mean, can be?
Sure. And we'll use the Medical Academy Health Science one to start off with, or Principles of Arts and AV. First of all, staffing decisions have to be made by the board in the spring for us to look at where we're going to put those programs. So that question sort of ties back in with a question Mr. Rice asked earlier. What is a child going to be offered as a freshman versus if they were a sophomore? In growing the CTE programs, it is not our proposal that you just look at and we think about putting blanket teachers at every campus independently. We acknowledge that in year one, it would be fiscally responsible for us to share teachers across areas. So by doing that, if we started the health science program at every campus, then in year one, we would only offer the first health science course at the campuses that currently have nothing, because there would be no student that has taken the coherent sequence to get them to year two. So it does not make sense for us to pay a teacher to sit there and only offer one course, if you will. The health science specialization is because of the licensures and because it is very extensive and it has a long history. So that is why the recommendation exists to continue that program. We feel like we can do a great job of offering health science at other campuses. Our numbers drive that. Workforce industry numbers drive the need for us to consider doing that.
Okay, so one of the things that you could help with is on the slides that we have, it's hard to see the writing underneath the pictures.
Yes.
So all the statistics that you gave about the number of students enrolled and what had pathways and all, we can't really read that very well. So it's in this one?
Yes, I understand. It's got to do with us clicking and it phasing in. Yes,
that's okay.
We'll get you some new slides then.
I didn't see it in that one, but I didn't look that carefully. So if you could help us with that, I think that would be helpful. Then, with regard to these pathways, did I understand it correctly that there is an introductory type course for each of the pathways? There's a basic course that comes first in the sequence, and then the courses are sequenced? Or there's a basic course, and then maybe there's some choices? Or how does that work?
Yes. There is generally an introduction.
All of the above?
That's correct, and that's where CTE is different than some of your other areas, because while if you're taking band, you take band 1 before you take band 2. We're not going to all of a sudden become first chair in the symphonic band or a concert band. In CTE, there's generally an introductory course, and that could cross over areas. A teacher might teach an introduction to Principles of Human Service that might cover part of the architecture and construction. It might cover information technology, different courses. That can be taken independent, or it could be taken concurrently with maybe a level 2 or a level 3 course. So CTE is different because you may not take any one CTE class in your first year, but you may come back and decide, yes, I really want to become an accountant, so I'm going to take those business and finance classes down the road. So I could take those concurrently later in my high school career and still complete an endorsement pathway.
Okay, so on one of your slides, which I can't find a piece of paper now, but one of them you talked about the key to these types of things is the implementation. The key to making it work is the implementation. This board has had that conversation, 100 times if we've had it once. So what I'm trying to get at, and I think this is something Mr. Rice is trying to understand too, is you're talking about year 1 doing a breadth of courses. It's probably in here with dots. And then year 2, you're going to have to put in the sequencing courses 2 and 3, say, to meet kids' needs. I'm conjecturing here, but could you maybe outline a little bit what you're sort of suggesting?
In the document that was at your table today when you arrived, the pathways are denoted. Yes, the long one. The pathways are denoted, so if we'll refer back to, just for visualization, if you will, page 1, and you look at animal science pathway, You'll notice that the recommendation is for Austin High School to offer 4 courses in that pathway. Same with Bush, Clements, and so forth down the line. It's page 1 of stapled packet.
Oh, this one. Okay.
Pathway.
Got it.
You'll see that we show where those 4 courses would be. So by Austin High School, they have a square next to Vet Med application. Next year, they may not need to offer that class, but we would indicate to students where their pathway would be down the road. So it is denoted on this document what it would look like when it is completely built out.
And you talked about something about conversations with principals and understanding the capacity at the different schools and what staff they have in place already and what capacity they would have to teach some of these courses. And so that seems like a very intensive research project to figure out what...
It has been.
So some of that work's already been done?
Yes, ma'am. We started in the spring with, at the time, what CTE called advisory committees, where we brought industry and our teachers in to start talking about what are the courses that we need to offer instead of arbitrarily deciding what's the best way to go or what do we want to do. So we started in May looking at that and meeting with workforce industry. Then we started gathering some data as far as what we currently have. So we've reviewed our current teacher certifications, and then in September and October we've looked at facilities.
Okay, so that's something that I missed. So what is here is a pretty good, a pretty complete plan with a fairly reasonable. You feel fairly confident that it could be implemented because you have the right facilities and staff in place.
Yes.
Yes, there will be further, conversation with certain principals because in certain schools, perhaps maybe an area has been repurposed. It was designed to be one thing, it's been repurposed to be used for something else, and so we would have to have a conversation maybe with that particular principal about that particular room and how that might look next year, those kinds of things, but those are minor, there are fewer of those, but there are a few of those that there's left to be, those discussions left to be had. But right now, what's in front of you, we believe, is doable.
Okay.
It is doable out there in our schools.
Okay, and it with an excellent implementation plan backing it up in terms of communication and understanding. And I think Mrs. Tossan and maybe several brought it up about communicating with parents is obviously going to be critical in this.
Yes, ma'am. The documents that will be presented for the campuses will be similar in nature. Of course, they don't need to see what's currently offered, but will be very similar in nature when we get ready to roll out course selection, and that's been a joint effort with College and Career Readiness, Steve Shields and his department. We've been educating counselors for the past 6 weeks on how we would counsel students, so we will be ready to go. The other critical piece is that we need to start recruiting teachers. We're talking about adding 23 teachers. This work had to be done so that we could get ahead of the game for districts and hiring teachers.
Okay, so when we look at this, you said we were going to be, my understanding is we're going to be voting on this in December. What is it that we're voting on?
You're voting on the academies. It is our understanding that when the academies were in their inception, the board voted to implement the academies. Okay. So if the academies, any of them, were to be phased out, we believe that it's appropriate that the board would make that final decision. The administration will support whichever way you go with that, obviously.
Good. So that's what we're deciding on in December, is we're deciding on the academies. This plan for the pathways for House Bill 5 is what it is. Okay, and we'll be dealing with budgets and staffing and those types of things in the spring. do you have additional clarification?
Well, I just like, yeah, I want to be observant of your term is what it is, because we do want to be very open that we do want the board's feedback as well as the community feedback when we go forward. Certainly the academies is the board specific action.
Okay.
But we want to make sure the board is very well informed about the pathways and endorsements and about how we plan to address that. We want the community to know that as well. And if there are questions, feedback, anything at all, then we value that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So the one thing I heard Mr. Rosenthal say that I would like to reiterate is looking at pathways and skill development in areas that are in need in our area seems wise, because it allows for the greatest ability to partnership with businesses and provides workforce-ready graduates to meet the needs of the businesses in our county and in our area, in our region. So it seems wise that certainly we would start there if possible. Of course, there's a cost analysis of that, as you sort of mentioned, but it seems only natural that we would build these partnerships with the businesses that exist, meeting the needs that they have. So I guess that's my comment on that. I think I'll pass the baton over to Mr. Rosenthal.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. George, I understand your passion on this issue. We've discussed this earlier this summer when we got together, and I think you know where a lot of us stand. But when I see this, where you're now expanding opportunities for kids at Willow Ridge and Marshall and some of the other places, I think that overwhelms any benefit of the academies. Myself and Mrs. Bailey both have incredibly high achieving kids. They're inspired by some really awesome teachers. I feel very confident that our district has very professional, high-level teachers. And I think that all kids at all schools, not just at academies, at all schools can benefit from that. And I think that leaves our district and our community in a much better position. And again, speaking as the parent of a high achiever, I see it done without the academies. And so I am fully supportive of this plan. I do have some questions, some specific questions, but I will leave that for some emails. And rather than waste everybody's time, and we can discuss those and you'll all see those questions. But again, the main question comes back down to the grandfathering issue, and so if we want to discuss that more.
So what I heard on the grandfathering issue is, let me see if this is what I heard, that the board is comfortable with grandfathering kids that are currently in an academy program all the way through that and allowing them to finish at their home school with that program. But we want to understand the cost associated with that in terms of transportation. And we also want to understand the impact that has on the available capacity for feeder pattern alignment. Is that correct?
Well, I think that and the impact when we do our feeder patterns and boundary recommendations, the grandfathering is going to have to go hand in hand, because again, I'm going to disagree. I hardly ever disagree with Ms. Whitbeck over there, but I'm going to have to. We're going to be moving smaller neighborhoods into a school that they've never been to. And you talk about how important high school is. All right, an academy student is no more special than a zoned in non-academy student. And I want to make that importance. And also, these were these kids' choices to go into an academy. We also have the kids who wanted to stay at their high school. So I think we have to really look at both. And as a board, what's going to be in the best interest of the kids, because it's going to impact capacity going down the road. So 3 to 4 to 5 years, are we going to be doing this all over again because we implemented too late? So if we don't move up the timeline, either as a board, it's going to probably be status quo for a while before we can even start this process and moving these communities into new high schools. So, I mean, there's feeder patterns, which is a different issue. Transportation, a different issue. I think students are important on both spectrums, whether they're academy, non-academy. We've got kids all around the district right now that are going to be impacted, period. So I think we really need, as a board, be careful what kind of signal you want to send to our non-academy kids too.
Ms. James, if I could just want to make sure I clarify, because maybe I didn't speak clearly. When I spoke about 3 scenarios, and I mentioned putting them in buckets because there are potentially 3 issues that you look at. When you open a new school, when you choose to change boundary or feeder pattern, and now you have a programmatic change. I see those as 3 separate ways to look at it when we make decisions about kids. Our job in this particular study was to focus on the academy. And so my recommendation to you is that we honor the students that are currently in the academies from grades 9 up, because it's a programmatic change, because they're coming from all over the district. And that the second scenario with that you have to make difficult decisions about with regard to feeder patterns was not my charge to recommend to you. Okay, and that I just am saying to you that those are not exactly the same scenario. They're different. They're highly emotional because they're kids and it's high school, and high school is just a really big deal. If I misrepresented that in some way to make you think I was trying to make a recommendation about boundary and feeder pattern, that was not my place, and that was not what I meant to do. But I do see them all as emotional. I can see why you would connect them. I think that's difficult work for you as a board. I really do, and we'll be there to support you and get you the data that you need, and we'll work with Mr. Cleaver on transportation. If you recall, we reduced transportation this past year with academies by going with satellite stops at the elementaries. And we were over 2 million. What was it, about 2.2, I think? And we were down to, 1.6. So we did reduce some. It may be a little challenging for us to figure it out, like if you were to say we would not transport freshmen, okay, they'd have to provide their own. Well, that sometimes, they're mixed on a bus. It would depend on if it bumps it to the second bus. It's going to be a little, I can just picture it's going to be a little tricky for us to get you those numbers, but we will work on doing the very best that we can, because we are at those satellites now. It's not a door-to-door. So I'm sure there is some savings, though, by not transporting everybody. I would think there would be some, but that's really Mr. Cleaver's area.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to make a final comment.
All right.
I don't want anybody to think I'm against this. And I said this is important. And first of all, I don't understand why Marshall and Willow Ridge only had 7 pathways to begin with, when there are other schools have up to 21. So absolutely, that is wonderful. I have no problem with that. That's not what I'm saying. All I said was, don't destroy something working out very good. No, I'm all for changes. That's all I said. I wanted to be clear, because I don't want somebody tomorrow coming say, I'm only for academies. That's not what I'm saying. So I want, every student, I'm all for all these pathways you're offering to every schools, and that's very good, and I have no problem with that. Because our children should get opportunities, and they should have choices, and I'm not against it. And so I just want to be very clear about that. So I don't want to leave somebody thinking, or on the record, I don't want somebody feeling like I'm just sitting here, I only care about academies. That's not true. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Verdeen.
I'll be brief with this, but it's my fault about the feeder patterns. I'm the one that brought that up, and once again, I just want to know that whatever decision we make for Academy students, we need to continue to make those for the students that are being affected by feeder patterns, and that's only fair. And then I've got a question for our board here. You know, we can't, as a lot of you know, we cannot talk about these things behind closed doors. We have these meetings designed to have discussion. And something I need to know from the board here is I can get emotional about this because of the time that I take away from my family. I've got a 1-year-old, I've got a 3.5-year-old. They want to be with their dad every minute they can. And I'm here to serve my community and do the best thing for all students in Fort Bend, not just a few students in Fort Bend. But my question is are we here to make decisions on emotions, or are we here to make decisions on facts? And I need to know that from my board, because that I will gauge my efforts going forward on that. From what I'm hearing now, time and money are not an issue to us. Obviously we got all the time and money. So that's what I'm hearing. So I just want to know, I mean, are we here to make emotional decisions as a board, or are we here to make decisions based on fact?
Well, can I respond?
Yes, go ahead.
Because that's sort of along the lines, I was actually going to hearken back to something that you said a few meetings ago about this board being strong enough to make very difficult decisions. And we are obviously staring down some very difficult decisions all at the same time. And I think we are strong enough to make those decisions. And one of the comments I made earlier today is that as board members, we don't really get the luxury of being able to look at this emotionally or how it impacts our own kids or a few kids. We're trustees. And so we do have to take that 50,000 mile high look and see how it impacts 72,000 plus kids in this district. And so I agree that we have to base decisions on the data that's given to us, as well as the research that we do, while being mindful that it is human beings that we are impacting, and families and kids, most importantly. One of the things I would say, because I know it is an emotional issue for you, KP, and you know, we do get that way when it is about our kids, and rightfully so. I think we have to be careful when we say we're going to be a mediocre district because we're making a change anywhere. I don't think that's true. I don't think we are. I am looking at 1,872 kids enrolled in academies, and they are very important and every bit as important as any other kid in this district. But that doesn't mean that the other 70,000 kids are mediocre. I think we have to look at all of our kids. And I do think that the slide you held up is very important, and that's why I asked the questions that I asked, because I don't want rigor to suffer. I don't want, you know, the things that the kids in the academies are getting to suffer. And so I think we need to be very mindful of that. And there are families that moved here, you know, for that specific program. At the same time, if we are going to offer the same standard of education at a student's home school, you know, I don't see the benefit of offering the same exact programming and just transporting them to another school. So, but I want to be sure that we are, you know, being, you know, just being sure that we're continuing to offer that level of rigor for those students that want that. And I also don't think that because I mean, we spend money on a lot of things in this district, a lot of programs, athletics, fine arts, academics. I mean, you can run the list. And you can't say that we shouldn't spend money on football because we're not churning out NFL football players. Just like you can't say we shouldn't spend money on band because we're not churning out, symphony orchestra, performers. We spend money on these programs because we think they're good for kids, because they offer a wide variety of choice, and because extracurricular activities boost academic performance, and that's a fact. So I think spending our money on all of these things is important. I mean, I think, like Jason said, seems like we have all the time and all the money. I think there are good programs that we need to continue, but I think we just need to be very careful about surmising that, the other 70,000 students in this district are mediocre. I just didn't, I disagree with that. But I do think we are strong enough to make this decision, and none of the decisions we make are going to be easy. But I do want to keep the families at the forefront of the conversation and of the thoughts. That's my take.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson.
I would just say, Mr. Burdine, that we have to make the best decisions we can based on data and facts, but also we can't be just cold, hard facts all the time. So it has to be balanced, and that's the slippery slope. Everything we do has to be balanced when we do that. I think as we go forward, what I've learned from serving on the board, and by the way, you're lucky that you came on the board now instead of 2010 if you're worried about money, because we had to make some draconian cuts in 2010, and it was not much fun. But as the district over time offers different programs to our students, all of those, and I agree with Mrs. Tasson, all of our students are important. When we offer programs to students, such as the Academies, and we encourage and invite them to participate, when things change and we need to take a hard look at that, we have new legislation that comes in, such as House Bill 5, that might impact the way we deliver instruction, then we need to do it as sensitively as possible, and allow students that we've invited to come and who've chosen to do that at least the opportunity to finish up what they started. And when it comes to and I agree also with Mrs. Tassan that, we do have to watch our money, but we make investments in our kids. We need to provide our children opportunities, our own children in our families, opportunities that raise their perspective on the world, give them opportunities to do things that help make them well-rounded people, opportunities to succeed, and we need to give those same opportunities to the 72,000 and growing number of children in Fort Bend ISD. So within our own families, I know that we try to do that. Each family tries to give their children things that they didn't have. When my oldest son was going to, he was attending Clements, he was in the band, and he came home and said, well, we have to go to New York City and play at Carnegie Hall, and I don't want to go. And I said, well, I don't care, you're going. When I was your age, Carnegie Hall is a place you heard about, but you never thought you'd get to go there, much less fly on a plane, and you're going to go there and play in Carnegie Hall? That's tremendous. So you're going, and you're going to like it. So we do these things, we provide these opportunities for our kids to help them grow and lift their perspective, and according to our means. So every year we have to balance a budget. That's the one thing when Mrs. James and I were in Washington, D.C. talking to our senators' aides, and they were asking us what's up with public education and making some comments that they couldn't fix everything. I said, well, our school board can do one thing that Congress can't do, and she said, what's that? Balance a budget. every year we have to balance our budget. Every year we have to make difficult decisions on how we're going to spend our finite resources. So in closing, it's just, you know, I like to play golf, so I took some golf lessons, and I asked the instructor, how tightly should I grasp the club? And he said, not too tight, not too soft, just right. And so that's kind of what we're trying to achieve in all of our decisions, I think, is the balance. But you bring up a good point, and thank you for doing that, as you always do so very courteously.
Mrs. Bailey.
Well, I'm kind of with Jason here. I mean, our decisions do have to be data-driven, and we have to behind sound numbers. And I think at this board, going forward, we have the data to do that. We ask for that data. We're pretty involved for asking for it. I think we've seen what happened in the past with not looking at data, doing zoning, feeder patterns, and academies. So I do think we have the data, and as a matter of fact, because you asked about data, we have 365 students at the Global Studies Academy. All right, I think there goes our capacity at Clements for the feeder patterns. So I would just say again, we have the data here. 369 at the math and science. By the way, the 365, I don't think very many are zoned to Clements. So, right there.
9% or something.
Only 34. So I think what you're going to have when we grandfather the academy students, it's going to be a while before we can actually do the zoning. I just don't see how we can handle Clements right now. They're going to be over capacity, and other schools will be under capacity until the academies are phased out. So we have to look at those numbers. And I remember back in 2011, by the way, that zoning, where they had Elkins at 115% over capacity. Look at them today. Okay, so projections are just projections. But I will say that we do have the Clements factor in here, and we've got to be really careful, because that's going to affect our feeder patterns. There's just not a lot we can move into Clements right now. So I'm with Jason. Facts. We got to look at them.
Thank you. Mr. Rosenthal.
Yeah, I think, first, I agree with everything Ms. Tassin said earlier. Couldn't have said it better, as well as other comments. So I think going forward, if we can see some of the numbers and maybe some possible scenarios where, you know, we talked about moving Telfair into Clements. Well, now what will it look like? You know, because you're going to end up splitting. They're still going to end up at Kempner and Clements, you know. So, yeah, it's going to create some issues. But I overall, again, I think this is the best thing for the district as a whole. So, and I think we are using data. We're using House Bill 5, and I think we're creating more opportunities for more students.
I think it'd probably be appropriate for me just to note that the board needs to know, especially given your concern about the grandfathering piece, as we've done the feeder patterns and boundary work, we have never lost sight of the fact that the board has clearly stated that academies are portable. And so I don't want you to feel like that we're disregarding that. I do think there is, once students have begun opportunities in a high school, though, it is hard to move them. So we have the same challenge in transitioning the feeder pattern and boundary changes as well. And so I think I know there's been concern over some of my comments about this is going to take time to phase all of this in, and this is one of the reasons we've been saying that all along. Because if we really want to come back to the family and the student currently enrolled in any high school, are we going to be willing to move any school midstream, any student midstream after their 10th grade or 11th grade year, or even after their 9th grade year? And so I think we need to be of one understanding that that's why we're taking the amount of time we're taking to develop those recommendations, is because personally, I have a hard time saying because we're changing your feeder pattern and your boundary, now you're going to have to switch high schools after you're going into your sophomore year, because students do create their school family, whether it's band, ROTC, whatever it is that they're doing, they've made deep connections and it's hard to move them. And so that's a lot of our work is rooted in what is the implementation strategy for all of this, especially feeder patterns, because if you start saying a 9th grade class is going to begin at this new high school, but you're going to grandfather the upperclassmen, how many transportation routes are you going to be running to make that happen? Or are you just going to say you can stay, but you're going to have to provide your own transportation? Do we take that same approach with academies? If we do that, we could lose a significant number of the academy students, and then it becomes challenging as to whether we continue to try to maintain a viable program for the ones who are able to get themselves there. So you can kind of see, but please know, all the things you're bringing up, we're listening to carefully, because our job is to bring forth recommendations, and when we're listening to what you're saying, we value what you're saying, but I want you to know we've been thinking on these things for a long time, trying to navigate what this is really going to look like in the big picture for all of this in transition.
Yeah, I just see if we can see the big picture, like we've seen with the feeder and feeder pattern and zoning so far. Just see it visually, then I think we can understand. But I agree. It's like I brought up, my own student. It'd be quite a shock to move them out, after their freshman year. So I understand.
But by the same token, then, if we know what we're going to do, we're starting new kids as freshmen every year in terms of the feeder pattern part of it. So it's gonna be a perpetuating problem. We're never gonna stop having freshmen.
But as long as you're clearing out enough space for them, that's the thing. See, you're going to graduate a class, but then the zoned-in population is going to fill in, plus you still have academy students there. It just makes less space. So again, we just need to see the numbers and the flow chart and see how it all works.
Right,
and
I agree.
I think,
I agree. Okay. So do we have any other comments or things we'd like to say, or things for the administration to consider when they're looking at all of this? Okay, but if something comes to your mind, then please email Dr. Dupree so he can add it to the list. Thank you, ladies, very much. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for a tremendous amount of research in getting it all together for us and presenting very coherently. I'd like to oh my God, goodness. A nap, a 5-minute break. We can take a 2-minute break. Does that work for you? A run around the block, a dash outside.